Hi, everybody. Before I get into the official list, I want to talk about some parameters that I created for myself. So, this list will include either completed series that I've completed, or series that are maybe not finished by the author, but that I've read every publication so far. And that's why you might not see series that I've talked about on my channel that I've started but not finished. And then the one exception to that are trilogies within a series or series within a series that I've completed. I did make an exception for that. And I also want to say that recency bias and nostalgia do play a role on my list. I don't think there's any getting around that. But I did try to take into account how often I think about the series and how much reread value I feel the series has. So that informed some of my ranking of this list. And of course, I will update this in the future. On to the official list, and my number 10 favorite fantasy series is going to be the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is told in first-person narration from a character named Fitz Chivalry. He's a young royal bastard in a precarious position as he's trying to understand his duty in the Six Duchies and training to become an assassin, as you might be able to tell from some of the book titles. This story is brought to life through his perspective. You get to know several vivid characters, a wonderful animal companion, vivid settings, and this also explores themes such as self-sacrifice and duty, loneliness. I found myself very connected to this story, and it's ranked very low on my list because I haven't yet read on in the Realm of the Elderlings, but I have a feeling that as I read on in the Realm of the Elderlings, I'm going to look back and appreciate this original trilogy even more. My number 9 favorite series is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. What's unique about this series is the way it's structured in 4 books over the long span of time. There are time skips between each book, but somehow the story flows seamlessly. And at the heart of this series is the friendship between 2 young men. Well, they start out as young men in the first book, and they grow older with each installment. But we are exploring the price of friendship, the price of betrayal, the price of love, the price of war, the price of defying tradition, and the price of power with this unique, unusual, whimsical, and dark magic that involves poetry and a reflection of the human psyche. The settings of this story were immersive and somewhat evocative of Japan, and it made me want to travel quite a bit. My number 8 favorite series is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. This follows a gunslinger named Roland. He is chasing a man in black across the desert, and he's trying to make his way to the Dark Tower. He makes some friends along the way, which become his quartet, and there's an animal companion in the series named Oi. One of the things that's unique about this series is the way it blends so many genres together, the way that we get urban fantasy, western, horror, a little bit of sci-fi mixed in there, metafiction, but we also get different worlds bleeding together, and we get characters that come from different worlds or different places, different timelines. And not only are the characters extremely vivid and well realized in this series, but the way they interact with each other is also so well done. It was so believable to me. I felt very connected to these characters as I read on in this series. Book 4, Wizard and Glass, is my favorite in the series. And my enjoyment was a little inconsistent throughout. Sometimes I loved what King was doing, and other times I felt like it missed the mark a little bit here and there. But the reason it makes my top 10 is because I still get emotional thinking about these characters and thinking about certain moments in the series, and also just appreciating the risks that King took in this series. And I also think a lot about the themes still, the themes of addiction, obsession, forbidden love, and the way he also explores mental health with some of the characters. There are so many powerful moments in this series that stay with me, so many emotions that still come up thinking about it. So for that reason, the Dark Tower series has to make my list, and I'll just go ahead and say it. Oi is my favorite animal companion of all time. The Gentleman Bastards is number 7 on my list. This is a series by Scott Lynch. It is unfinished, and I don't care. I loved my time reading all 3 books. Specifically, Red Seas Under Red Skies is my favorite. And this is a series that is often referred to as swashbuckling, which I think is an appropriate adjective. As it says on the back of the first book, the Gentleman Bastards are thieves who steal from the rich but maybe don't necessarily give to the poor. Their common saying is that thieves thrive and the rich remember. And what I loved about this series were the settings. They were so imaginative, and the character work was amazing. There's a surprising depth to the friendship, specifically between characters Locke and Jean in this series. And it's surprising because there is so much wit and banter and humor sprinkled in. I feel as though Lynch is one of the best when it comes to writing great dialogue. I found these books incredibly entertaining, and if Scott Lynch releases another book, I will certainly be there for it. Number 6 is The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. Now, I know some people are going to say this is historical fiction rather than fantasy, but I think there is a case for this being somewhat fantasy, so I'm including it anyway because I adore this trilogy. This is an Arthurian retelling, but what's special about it is it's not told from Merlin's perspective or Arthur's perspective or Lancelot. It's told in first-person narration from a character named Dervahl. It's a framed narrative, and he's relaying his experience meeting Arthur, meeting Merlin, and we're really exploring the mystique of the hero. Fate is inexorable. There is the role of prophecy that is prevalent throughout this trilogy, and the battle scenes are second to none. Now, I'm not always here for battle scenes and action in stories, but I was here for it in the Warlord Chronicles because I don't think anyone does it better than Bernard Cornwell. He has such a gift for taking into consideration terrain, bringing emotional ebbs and flows to the action scenes, for adding emotional moments, heartfelt moments. This series has quite the emotional range. I remember feeling angry at times and laughing at times and feeling suspense and excitement, anticipation. So many emotions roll through you at the same time as you're getting to know these wonderful characters. And I have to say that, like I said before, even though this is not told through some of the more common characters in an Arthurian retelling, I grew so attached to Dervahl, especially by book 2, Enemy of God, which is my favorite in the trilogy. Even though this is arguably not fantasy, or maybe it is fantasy, maybe it isn't, it does explore the truth, courage, fate, all those themes that we as fantasy readers tend to think of as classic fantasy. Number 5 for me is going to be The First Law World by Joe Abercrombie, specifically The Age of Madness, which is my favorite. And yet you do want to start from the beginning. You want to read the original trilogy, starting with The Blade itself, read the 3 standalones, and then experience the glory that is The Age of Madness. Now, this is a series that is a bit more minimal when it comes to world building and magic. The world is indifferent, and the characters are deeply flawed. The world could care less if these characters present any courage or nobility, honor, but that is part of the humor of this series. Even though it takes a little bit of a darker look at humanity and human psychology, it is quite funny and it is wildly entertaining. And I have to say that I think Abercrombie is one of my favorite writers when it comes to modern fantasy prose. He has a wonderful flow with his writing, great humor again, wonderful contrast with characters, and great use of simile for humorous effect. Yet I do think it probably pays off more if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings and maybe some other fantasy before starting this journey. But I think you'll be well rewarded if you do. Number 4 for me is going to be the Second Apocalypse series by R. Scott Baker. I'm specifically thinking of Aspect Emperor, and The White Luck Warrior is my favorite in all of the Second Apocalypse. That's book 2 in the Aspect Emperor quartet. Now, this series changed my whole entire notion or understanding of fantasy. Before I read the series, I bought into that saying, hope springs eternal, meaning that when you have an element of hope in story, that allows possibility, that allows wonder to grow, that allows dimension. If you cut off hope, I was fearful that maybe cutting off hope would mean a lack of dimension or a halt to that journey, to that expansion that wonder and hope bring. So I was proven wrong with this series because it is quite tragic. It is extremely bleak and dark, and yet there is so much depth and dimension to the darkness and the way that Baker explores the human psyche, the shadow aspect of the human psyche. So this is a series that explores holy wars, epic conquests, family, betrayal, all of those things, but in the darkest way possible. I found the world building the most realized, possibly of any fantasy I've read, or at least one of the most realized worlds that I've ever read from. It felt like it was already completely fleshed out when I started the first page of the first book. As I mentioned in my Prince and Nothing trilogy review, Baker has a way with words, incorporating the sacred and the profane, the beautiful and the vulgar seamlessly into the narrative. And the other thing that I love about Baker's writing is his incorporation of theme is so in depth. He gives you so much dimension to theme in which he dissects the theme. He doesn't just present a theme, he really dissects the full in-depth experience of that theme. And so this is also a series that explores free will, whether we have any or not. And it could borderline on nihilistic at times, but I'm still super impressed with the series. I still think that it's phenomenal in what it does. Although this is a series I do not recommend widely, it is one I found mesmerizing. Number 3 is a pretty basic one for a fantasy list, but for good reason. The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. When I think about this series, one word comes to mind, and that is heart. The heart of nature, friendship, connection, hobbits, and also the fragility of the heart when we lose our connection, to the magic around us, when we lose connection to the world and to nature and to friendship and to ourselves. This is a meaningful series to me. I feel like Tolkien's prose is stunning. This is a world that I could easily return to again and again. I cried so hard at the end of Return of the King, and I could easily see myself rereading this many times and crying over and over again. My number 2 favorite series is A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I've spoken many times on my channel about how meaningful, how important this was to me as a female reader, getting so many amazing female perspectives. And I also appreciate just the range of perspectives in general, how we get so many different players on the board. I also feel like this series is a standout for characters being involved in political machinations while something much bigger, a bigger threat is looming. And I feel like a lot of other fantasy writers like to incorporate that same device, but I don't think any other writer I know of or that I've come across is quite as good as George R.R. Martin, in my opinion, when it comes to integrating character, plot, and setting all together. I feel like those 3 things meld together so harmoniously in this series. I'm not saying other authors don't do it well, but for me, for my heart, for my reading taste, I feel like George R.R. Martin does it the best. And I know this series has a reputation for being grimdark, but I do think that that's underestimating what it does when it comes to some of the more powerful moments in this series. The way that a character who died early on in book 1 still lingers in the hearts and memories of characters in later books. There are so many beautiful moments in this story. And I'll also say this, I don't think anyone does dragons better than George R.R. Martin. That leaves one series left, and my number 1 favorite series, Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. No other series has made me think more about our world and my place in it than Malazan Book of the Fallen. It is the most sprawling series I have ever read, with literally hundreds of characters, and I found myself attached to so many of those characters and their journeys and the themes in this story. I know compassion gets mentioned quite a bit, but I really do love the way compassion was explored in this story, as well as the role of certainty and the role of loyalty, the role of witnessing. This explores the role of gods, the role of an empire, people working with the empire, people working against it, and people in between. There are aspects of military fantasy, sword and sorcery, epic fantasy. It's doing so many different things. And the journey was the most immersive and emotional I've ever been on. And when I finished The Crippled God, which is my favorite book in the series, I have never had a deeper book hangover. I felt like I was suspended for months, for years after finishing that book. I still feel emotional thinking about what it felt like to finish that series. The next day after finishing The Crippled God, I felt like I could start all over again. I didn't, but I felt like I could have. And I don't know what else to say except that this series is profound. There are certain things I could nitpick about it, but overall, it stands out as being just one of the most emotional powerful, sublime experiences I've had in fantasy and in literature in general. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I'm not going to recommend this series widely because I just think it's a very distinct flavor of fantasy. But if you want to hear more of my thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and link some other videos down in the description below, not only of my Malazan journey, but of other series I mentioned on this list. But now I want to hear from you. What are your favorite fantasy series? Were you surprised by any of my favorites? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.